Hey guys, it's Uncle Mike. Welcome back. Glad to have you along. We're talking today about a concept that I think underlies or can underlie your success or failure as an entrepreneur and really generally at life. That concept is called the locus of control. It was an idea introduced by a psychologist, an American psychologist in 1954. His name, Julian Rotter. He passed away, I think, in 2014. But Dr. Rotter had this concept of a continuum. And everyone's on this continuum somewhere in the way that they view the world and their own ability to control the outcome of their life. And so you either have an internal or an external locus of control. When I say either, you're somewhere on this continuum. It's not an on-off. It's not like you're totally internal or totally external. But someone with an internal locus of control believes that they have control to some degree over their life and the results of their life and the outcomes. And someone with an external locus of control believes that a lot of what is going on in the life that they're living is due to external forces. So for example, let's say you take a test, you've got an internal locus of control and you fail the test. Someone with an internal locus of control is going to say, well, I didn't study enough. I didn't spend enough time to prepare. I actually stayed up too late drinking beers with my buddies, and then I only had 3 hours of sleep. It's really, I should have got more rest. I should have studied more. Someone with an external locus of control would say, well, the professor never covered these questions. I never saw these questions before, or this test is really wired for someone that is of a different cultural background than me, or the patriarchy is responsible for me failing this test. You could just take this, you know where I'm going with that. When you've got an external locus of control, it's always somebody else's fault. Your situation is due to somebody else, something that's outside of you. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not here saying that if you have an internal locus of control, you can control everything. You can't. There are certain things in the universe, the cosmos, the experience of being a human being in this world that we can't control. You go shopping, you run over a nail, you didn't see the nail, it was in the road, and you got a flat tire. Yeah, you were driving the car, but it's not like, well, that's my fault. If I only could just have. No, you're driving the car, you got a flat tire. These things happen. And it's not a matter of like if you had just been aligned and been thinking good thoughts that the universe would have given you back a better experience as you're driving. So this is not a matter of assuming that somehow we can control everything. But when you have an internal locus of control, you tend to take responsibility more so for your situation. And that is so important. It's so important to take responsibility. Years ago, I tried to start a company. We were living in South Africa. I was in my mid-20s. I was a young fella, mid to late 20s. And I had gotten investors. I had this concept, investors, was in manufacturing. I was going to outsource the manufacturing. I created my brand. I was doing all this stuff. The company failed miserably. I crashed and burned that company. And my initial reaction was one of an external locus of control. I was like, well, the guy that was making the tool and die guy, he screwed me over and didn't deliver the dies in time. And, and I think that God probably didn't want me to be successful. So so he must have stymied things. And the government, the situation right now in the country. And I just had all these reasons. And this carried on for a handful of weeks and even months. And after a few months, I had this epiphany. I woke up one day and I'm like, Mike, if you don't take responsibility for this failure, your whole life, you're young, you got a young wife, you got little tiny babies. If you don't take responsibility for this failure, you are going to continue on with a life of failures. You've got to own this. You've got to take responsibility so that you can learn from your mistakes. You can learn what you did wrong. You can start to be honest with yourself about where things went sideways and how you can do them differently. If you don't do that, you're just going to go around and around this mountain every time you're approaching something. And so I embraced that failure. And it was hard. I spent months and months just depressed. hated myself. I mean, you just go through, it's like you hug the anchor and the anchor takes you to the bottom of the ocean. However, I had a rebirth. I kind of came back up and it was like, now I've learned something. I have agency and power, experience. This failure was worth its weight in gold. Yes, there was some shame. Yes, it put strain on relationships. It put strain on our finances. It was heartbreaking for my wife and I on a number of levels to go through that failure. And yet on the other side of it, because I took responsibility for it, because I shifted my mindset to one of an internal locus of control, I was able to get real wealth, gold, out of that failure and been able to use it in my life going forward. I want to give you an example. I've got a video out there. It's years old right now. It's Escape Wage Slavery Forever. It was part of an experiment. I was doing an SEO experiment to see if I could capture the snippet. Those of you in SEO know how Google would serve up the snippet. It still does. And so I wrote an article with 7 points. I structured and outlined it a certain way. It was great content. It told you at various stages of your life how you can continue to escape wage slavery, how you can be more free and have economic power and agency over your life, et cetera, build wealth. Culminating in a business, although I was saying to people, you don't have to own a business to escape wage slavery. There are other ways to do it. But the article outlined all that. Very good. Actually, very good step-by-step guide. And then I created a partner video because YouTube also a great search engine. I wanted to see how these things perform. Well, that video continues to get good traffic. And I got a comment the other day, and I want to share this with you. This is from WonderMax 1993, and WonderMax says, either you work or you starve. The chances of getting a passive income with the average salary is about 0%. Folks, it's about 0%, awful close to 0%. And you cannot tell people to get above average income because that's simply not possible. There will always be people who earn double the average and or inherit wealth, external. But other than that, most people will be stuck in wage slavery for life, and there is nothing they can do about it. Yes, you can spend only on food, never have a vacation, so you can scrape by with low salary. But it is simply not possible to improve above a certain point, like you imply by saying, quote, escape forever. Complete bullshit. So you can see, like when you read WonderMax 1993's comment, this person has an external locus of control. There's nothing you can do about your situation. It's all due to external factors. And in fact, people that are doing really well, they just got lucky. Somebody dumped a boatload of money in their lap, and they're just the exception to the rule. The rest of us, we're just trapped. Now look, the concept of wage slavery, as a little aside here, is a concept introduced by Marx and others in the communist world of thinking. And they use wage slavery kind of as I'll say a term of art, a technical term, to talk about the laborer being captive and how the labor creates all, people that work jobs create all this wealth, and then the capitalists, they steal all the wealth for themselves. And there's this disparity and inequity. And there's some truth to that. Like, I'm not going to disagree with some of Marx's critique. However, people that rail against escaping wage slavery, they tend to be socialist Marxists. I'm guessing this WonderMax 1993 is thinking along those lines and saying, well, wage slavery, unless you don't have to work a job, you're a wage slave. That's not necessarily true. You can have freedom and agency even if you go in and work a job. And I think that there's been a shift in our culture. Historically, the West, America, et cetera, has been much more oriented towards an internal locus of control. You can live the American dream. You can pursue your dreams. Anyone can become president. It's a meritocracy. You get in there and you work hard, and that hard work will pay off. If you pay your dues and keep your nose clean and work hard, that'll pay off and you'll be wealthy, healthy, and wise. All these great things. You live in a nice neighborhood, you drive a nice car, have a cute wife, leave it to Beaver. What's not to like? That was pretty much the way that Americans and most people in the West thought for the most part. I can't speak for the East. I don't know what culture's like there. However, we can see over the last number of years and even decades, that locus of control has been shifting along the continuum. And a lot of people now embrace an external locus of control, a worldview that says life is not fair. There's structural things and systemic things holding me back. There's patriarchy. There's racism. There's all this stuff conspiring against me. And this happens both on the left and the right, by the way. This is not just a leftist thing, although the leftists, they really, chef's kiss, you guys have perfected the art of blaming other people. Go ahead and hate me in the comments. I really don't care. But it happens on both sides. Both sides are always blaming somebody else. We have a culture now that is much more external locus of control focused, and we're always looking for reasons to blame somebody else. And we just kind of have this fatalistic, like there's nothing that can be done. So we're always looking for some big solution. The government, if the government would just fix this, if I could just get a guaranteed basic income, if I could just get some, government thing where they make my life free education, whatever, great, then that would be wonderful. That is not the mindset of the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is a person who believes that their actions, their activities have impact, that they have agency and control. And when things go their way, they say, hey, I did a great job. I'm grateful. I'm humble. Got lots of help. But at the same time, I worked hard and it paid off. Or if they fail, they say, hey, look, I worked really hard, but there's some things I missed. I need to learn. There are things I could do better next time. That they just had the sense that it's up to them to create their future. Now, this is not to say that someone with an internal locus of control believes they can control the universe. That's silly, and we've talked about that already, so we don't need to keep going on that. Now, a while back, I was looking at this concept of punk rock. Those of you that know punk rock was a movement in the 60s and 70s, mainly the 70s, into the 80s and even to the 90s. And it was a reaction against corporate rock, the corporatization, the commercialization of rock and roll. It didn't like all these giant labels and giant radio stations and gatekeepers and how overproduced and how slick everything had become in the music world. Music was supposed to be creative. It was supposed to be expressive. And rock and roll was supposed to fight the power. You got to fight the man. Rock and roll was supposed to be rebellious to a certain degree, and it had been co-opted to become mainstream. And so punk rock was this movement against all that. And I was thinking about how punk rock and today's private business owner, today's entrepreneur, today's person who's trying to figure out a way to create wealth, to have freedom and agency, is punk rock. There's a parallel there, that there's a certain number of things that are similar across the punk rock movement of the 70s and today's private business owner, in the sense that you're trying to fight against the big corporations. You're fighting against big government. You want freedom. You want agency. You believe that you can create. You believe that you can do things, and you want to create your own wealth, and you don't want somebody telling you what to do, and you're not looking to go to some big corporate office, suck up to somebody for measly benefits and a decent salary and security. You're willing to say, look, I don't want security. I'm willing to go out, make my way, take my lumps, take my chances, et cetera, and experience some success. So I was kind of looking at the parallels, and I was saying, okay, there's this kind of fight the power mentality. That's one similarity. Another similarity is that punk rock was super creative, very DIY, making their own T-shirts, pressing their own records, designing their own instruments. They might take an instrument and do all kinds of stuff to personalize it. They weren't worried about like formal education. You didn't have to have conservatory training or 12 years of music. You just grab that guitar and start thrashing, man. Just make noise and scream into that microphone. It was very DIY, very low tech, very much just like you got to do, you got to create, you got to make. And it was driven by a deeper ideology. And so I thought, yeah, there's some similarities between both punk rock and private business. However, there is one thing that stood out to me as being polar opposites across the two, and that is the locus of control. If you look at the ethos, if you look at the worldview and the mentality and the message of a lot of punk rock, it's so cynical, it's so hopeless. It looks at the world and says it's unfair and there's nothing that can be done about it. We're just these little, small, agency-less, powerless people and cogs in this giant machine, and we're going to rage against it, but we can't change it. You can't change it. You can't beat it. You can't overcome it. You can't change it and make it better. You can't produce a vision of something true and beautiful and good. So you might as well go the opposite, be ugly, nasty, scream and rage as you are consumed and swallowed up into the void. It's very nihilistic. Very nihilistic. It's hopeless. And yet, private business and people that have a vision for private business, they want to create something good. They want to create something special. They believe in a good life. They believe in a dream or a vision or a hope that they have. And they have this internal locus of control that tells them that if they do, and they try and they work and they stick to it, that they can over time overcome and realize their dream, realize their vision, that they can have agency and be free. And so while there are some parallels between the punk rock movement and the private business movement, if you will, of today, how private business owners these days are almost like society's rebels, if you will, there is a difference, and that difference is glaring. And so as you're looking at your life, I just want to encourage you, don't embrace an external locus of control, especially if you want to be successful. You have to start taking responsibility for your situation. You have to start looking and say, what could I have done differently? What can I do now? What are the things that I can do that over time will pay off? You have to have this sense that you have agency, that you have some level of power. Yes, we cannot control the universe, nor are we supposed to. And bad stuff happens to people with internal loci of control, locuses of control. However, you will not be successful, you will not thrive, and you will not feel and experience fulfillment if you go through life a victim, thinking that you have no agency, everything just happens to you, life is unfair, and there's nothing that can be done about it. You can never change. I just categorically reject that concept, reject that worldview. In my life, my many decades, I'm in my fifth decade, well into my fifth decade. Six, because I'm in my late 50s, that's 6 decades. Anyway, I have experienced the power of an internal locus of control and have been tempted at times to embrace an external when I didn't want to face up to my own failings. However, I'm grateful that I was able to do that I found the strength to do that. So, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this kind of content, if you're interested in strategy, business, entrepreneurship, I've got a free newsletter. I send out an email once a week. You can sign up for that a link in the description, I should say. Also, you can like and subscribe and do all the things. But the most important thing I want you to know is that Uncle Mike loves you, each and every one.